Most people are not afraid of failure. They are afraid of silence. Silence removes distraction. Silence removes performance. Silence removes the audience. And when the noise disappears, there is nowhere left to hide. Sit alone long enough, and your mind begins to speak. Unfinished regrets, unresolved anger, unanswered questions, doubts you've been outrunning for years. Most people cannot tolerate that confrontation, so they reach for something. A phone, a screen, music, conversation, anything to avoid the echo of their own thoughts. Distraction is socially acceptable escape. It looks productive, it looks connected, it looks normal. But beneath it is avoidance. You tell yourself you're staying busy, but busy with what? Avoiding yourself. If you need constant input to feel stable, you are not stable. Solitude exposes internal noise, and internal noise reveals instability, not weakness, instability. The inability to sit still without needing to be stimulated. Most people say they want clarity, but clarity requires quiet, and quiet requires courage. When you sit alone without distraction, your identity begins to loosen. You are not your job, not your status, not your relationships, not your performance. You are simply there, and that is unsettling. Because without roles, who are you? Most avoid solitude because it forces that question, and that question has no immediate answer. So they keep moving, scrolling, talking, working, consuming, not because they are productive, because they are uncomfortable. Comfort in distraction is dependence. The person who cannot sit alone is governed by external input, mood dictated by notifications, energy dictated by conversation, direction dictated by validation. Remove those, and they feel lost. But that lost feeling is not danger. It is unfamiliar territory. Solitude is a test, not of intelligence, not of success, of stability. Can you sit in a quiet room without reaching for something? Can you endure your own thoughts without trying to mute them? Can you face internal discomfort without immediately anesthetizing it? Most cannot, because when the world goes quiet, the self gets louder, and the self is rarely organized. It is conflicted, insecure, unfinished. But running from that noise does not silence it. It buries it. And buried instability always resurfaces. If you cannot sit with yourself, you will depend on others to regulate your state. You will need noise to feel normal. You will need attention to feel anchored. The inability to be alone is not loneliness. It is avoidance. And until you learn to sit still without escape, you will never know who you are without the world watching. Distraction is not harmless. It is strategic. Most people don't distract themselves because they are bored. They distract themselves because they are avoiding contact with their own mind. Silence introduces awareness. Awareness introduces discomfort, and discomfort demands relief. So the hand reaches for the phone, for the next video, for background noise, for conversation that fills space but says nothing. Distraction is modern anesthesia. It dulls internal friction. It suppresses reflection. It keeps you from noticing what remains unresolved. You tell yourself you're relaxing, but relaxation restores energy. Distraction consumes it. If you cannot be still for 10 minutes without needing stimulation, you are not resting. You are escaping. The mind left alone begins to surface patterns: regret, resentment, insecurity, uncertainty about direction, questions about identity. These are not threats, they are signals. But most people would rather scroll than interpret, rather consume than confront, rather feel temporary dopamine than long-term clarity. Distraction trains the nervous system to require constant input. Silence becomes intolerable. Stillness feels suffocating. The absence of noise feels like emptiness. So life becomes louder, more content, more opinions, more notifications, more avoidance. The more you flee silence, the more powerful it becomes. Because silence is not the problem. What silence reveals is the problem. You may discover you are not satisfied, not aligned, not as certain as you pretend. You may notice habits that exist purely to fill space. You may recognize that your busyness is not purpose, it is padding. Distraction allows you to delay self-examination, but delay is not resolution. Unexamined instability does not disappear, it accumulates. The person who cannot tolerate internal quiet will always depend on external volume. And external volume is unreliable. People leave, schedules change, noise fades. When that happens, the mind you avoided is still there, waiting. There is nothing wrong with entertainment, nothing wrong with conversation, nothing wrong with engagement. The problem is compulsion. When silence feels threatening instead of neutral. If you must constantly fill space, you are afraid of what space contains. And what it contains is you. Unfiltered, unperformed, unstimulated. Until you can sit with that version without needing to escape, distraction will own you. If you're done living in distraction, like and subscribe. This channel exists to help you protect your attention and build something real. When the noise stops, you begin to hear what has always been there. Silence is not empty, it is revealing. Without distraction, your mind stops reacting and starts surfacing. Unfinished conversations replay. Old mistakes revisit. Future fears attempt to forecast disaster. You notice how often you seek approval, how easily your mood shifts with praise or criticism, how dependent you are on external reassurance. These observations are uncomfortable, not because they are catastrophic, but because they are honest. Most people do not fear silence itself, they fear what silence exposes: insecurity, uncertainty, contradictions between who they are and who they claim to be. Silence removes performance. There is no audience to impress, no one to validate your narrative, no one to blame. Just you. And in that space, you begin to see the patterns. How you avoid conflict, how you chase recognition, how you overcommit to feel needed, how you distract yourself when discomfort rises. These are not accusations, they are data. The disciplined mind does not panic at revelation. It observes. It separates emotion from information. It asks, "What does this show me?" Silence becomes diagnostic. It shows where you are unstable, where you rely too heavily on attention, where your identity is built on reaction. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. This is the moment most people avoid, because awareness removes illusion. You can no longer pretend you are aligned if your actions contradict your values. You can no longer blame circumstance for patterns you repeat. Silence forces accountability. But accountability is not punishment, it is power. When you recognize your instability, you gain the ability to stabilize it. When you recognize your dependence, you gain the ability to reduce it. When you recognize your avoidance, you gain the option to confront it. The mind that can sit in quiet without reaching for escape develops clarity. Clarity about desires, clarity about weaknesses, clarity about direction, and clarity reduces chaos. Silence will show you where you are fragmented, but it will also show you where you are capable, where you are stronger than you thought, where you have been underestimating yourself. The self revealed in silence is not always flattering, but it is real, and reality is workable. Avoidance keeps you comfortable. Silence makes you accurate. Most people choose comfort, few choose accuracy. If you can remain present when nothing is distracting you, you begin to build something rare. Stability that does not depend on noise. At first, sitting with yourself will feel unnatural. Your body will want movement. Your mind will demand stimulation. Your hand will reach without thinking. Do not fight the urge. Observe it. Notice how quickly discomfort appears. Notice how urgently it asks to be relieved. That urgency is conditioning. You have trained yourself to avoid internal friction. Now you are reversing it. Stability is not built through noise, it is built through exposure. Exposure to boredom, exposure to unresolved thoughts, exposure to the quiet tension you normally silence. When you remain still long enough, something subtle happens. The intensity fades, the thoughts lose sharpness, the discomfort softens. You realize the silence was never attacking you, it was reflecting you. Most people mistake reflection for threat. They assume that discomfort means danger. It does not. It means growth is available. If you cannot be alone without anxiety, you will always depend on external anchors. People to regulate your mood, noise to regulate your focus, validation to regulate your identity. That is not freedom. Freedom is internal regulation, the ability to stabilize yourself without assistance. Learning to sit with yourself is the beginning of that freedom. You stop running from your thoughts. You stop numbing minor discomfort. You stop outsourcing emotional control. This does not mean you isolate yourself. It means you are no longer afraid of solitude. There is a difference. The person who enjoys solitude does not fear abandonment. The person who can endure silence does not panic when attention fades. The person who understands themselves does not depend on constant affirmation. When you sit alone without escape, you begin organizing your inner world. What matters? What does not? What aligns? What needs correction? Clarity emerges quietly, not in a dramatic breakthrough, but in small realizations, patterns you hadn't noticed, habits you can now adjust, limits you can now expand. The ability to sit with yourself is the foundation of self-command. Because if you cannot face your own mind, you will always run from pressure. If you cannot endure quiet, you will always chase distraction. If you cannot tolerate internal tension, you will always seek external relief. Sit anyway. Let the noise surface. Let it settle. Let it organize. You are not fragile, you are unpracticed. If this gave you clarity, like the video. If you value discipline over distraction, subscribe. Build stability quietly.